Hello and welcome back to the Duskmourn Limited Set Review. Today I will be looking at the red cards and discussing how good I think they're going to be in Limited, specifically Draft is generally my main focus. If you have not been to one of my set reviews before, I use a little bit of a different grading system than some people. It's 5 tiers. Tier 1 is good, Tier 5 is bad. This enables me to have a little more room for discussion amongst the cards while sort of still providing a general framework for how good I think they are. And yeah, that's what today's all about, is just getting a good look at the cards, sort of discussing what they do, and it's as much for me as it is for you, giving me an advantage in terms of just knowing what some play patterns look like right before the set. And we're just going to get started with Bedhead Beastie. 4 red for a 5/6 with Menace, and Mountain Cycling for 2. So there's a full cycle of the land cyclers. The red one, not very exciting. I think, again, you can get, like, all of these, they have given them reasonable stat lines, I think, this time around. The 2-mana cyclers, we've kind of seen 2-mana cyclers for the last 2 years or so, and they've been pretty medium across the board. I'm starting all of the ones, I think all of them, maybe except for the green one, in tier 4, just because I don't really like. Again, they just seem medium to me. I think you can play them and it's not a disaster, but there's generally going to be better things to do in Limited these days than just play these 2-mana cyclers. Betrayer's Bargain, 1 and a red for an instant. Is an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature or enchantment, or pay 2. It deals 5 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Yeah, this is really nice. So 4 mana, deal 5, exile is actually not a bad rate by itself. It's not quite a tier 2 card. I would say it would be sort of closer to tier 3, but it's sort of on the fringes. And this is now solidly a tier 2 card with the upside of being able to sack something to make it cheaper. Specifically, red-black likes to sacrifice things in this set, so getting to do that with your spell to make it more efficient is obviously very good. And sometimes you just want to sack your stuff and make your spell cheaper. The fact that it's not double pipped in any way is really nice. That means it's actually kind of splashable removal. And yeah, just a really strong card all the way around. Exile, again, specifically very relevant in this set, as there are Reanimator / Graveyard stuff going on. Boiler Bilge's Ripper, 4 and a red for a 4/4. When it enters, you may sacrifice another creature or enchantment. When you do, it deals 2 damage to any target. So, what I was kind of thinking is, how good would a 5-mana 4/4 deal 2 to anything be, like, without the having to sack something? And I was kind of like, would that even be a tier 2 card? And I think the answer is yes, but it's it still isn't a card that you're like super thrilled about to take early in the draft. So I kind of was like with the additional conditions that yes, sometimes is upside, but is mostly downside. I'm not super excited about this. Another kind of there's just, when it comes to expensive things to put in your deck, this is just not a priority for me. Chainsaw, 1 and a red for an equipment. When it enters, it deals 3 damage up to 1 target creature. When 1 or more creatures die, put a rev counter on Chainsaw. Equipped creature gets +X/+0, where X is the number of rev counters on Chainsaw. So I originally had this a bit live. This has just kept going up and up and up in my rankings because of several things. First of all, it's an equipment that has an ETB that impacts the board, and those tend to be pretty difficult for Wizards to balance well. They have a really hard time getting it right, because kind of once it tips over the good scale, it just is great. And here I feel like is another example of that, where you get this equipment that immediately is just a removal spell, so you can just play it like it's a removal spell in your deck. And then on turn 6, you just equip your thing, and then your opponent's you just get to equip, every one of your creatures becomes a threat for the rest of the game with this in play. And then your opponent feels like they have to remove the equipment, which is very good for you, because then you're getting a 2-for-1. And to me, this just seems like a really strong way to start your draft. It's interaction, it's cheap, it scales with the game, it is always impactful. I like to see this taking over games. You don't no one's gonna make you equip this. It just sits on the battlefield and accumulates. It gets better and better every turn. Your opponent doesn't want to trade off, and then you're just kind of sitting. It just seems really, really strong to me. Charred Foyer, 3 in a red for the left side of a room. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library you may play it this turn, and Warped Space, 4 red red. Once each turn you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast from exile. So Warped Space is not very good, the discount mode. You can activate it sometimes, and sometimes there are several things that let you unlock rooms for free or discounted rates, so sometimes that'll come up and you'll get to do this. We've seen the Charred Foyer side before as a red enchantment for 4 mana that gives you value at the beginning, every turn you draw an additional card. They tend to be okay. The one from Brothers War was 2 red red, and this is 3 in a red. So this, I think, and that card was good but not busted. I think this is going to be good but not busted. So it's one of those cards that may get overdrafted by people because they think it's probably better than it is. There's actually more enchantment interaction. I don't know about that in terms of Brothers War versus this set. I think it's probably pretty similar, actually. They were both artifact and enchantment themes. So this is removable. It's going to be nice to have it, but I don't think it's a busted mythic or anything. So whenever you see a mythic that's not busted, just kind of assume there are going to be people taking it higher than they should. That's just kind of how it goes. Clockwork Percussionist. Single red mana for a 1/1 with haste. When it dies, exile the top card of your library. You may play it until the end of your next turn. So a lot of things going on here. It's only mana 1/1 haste. 1 mana 1/1 haste is not very good unless it's impacting the board when it dies, generally. This is not doing that. Yes, when it dies, it cycles itself, and if you're doing sacrificey stuff, is this a card that you want? I think you could play it, and it's not a disaster. I don't know. I'm not that excited about this. Again, the theory behind the I'm gonna have my 1-drop enable delirium for me, it doesn't really always work out that way. I feel like more often you're just kind of, it's better to enable delirium through your graveyard than to trying to get a creature on the board and have it die. And this seems to me it's I want to get this on the board and have it die, and then my delirium's enabled. Generally, it's better to just get stuff in your yard and then have delirium be enabled that way than just to try to be if I get this in play and then it dies, I'll be halfway to delirium. It just doesn't always work that way. So maybe this will end up playing a larger role than I think. It does kind of look like a card that's you'll never. So first of all, you'll never play this in a blue-red deck. You just would never play it there. I don't really think the red-white deck is functional, so I don't think you're going to be playing that deck, and I don't think you would play this card in that deck. Red-green, I don't know if this is large enough, so it's that's it too. Red-black seems okay, maybe, but I don't know. To me, it's got to prove it to me. Cursed Recording. 2 red for an artifact. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a time counter on it. Then if there are 7 or more time counters on it, remove those counters and it deals 20 damage to you. When you cast an instant and you can tap it, when you next cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, it's an instant copier thing, but you can copy up to 7 of them, and then once you cast your 8th one, you die. No, once you cast your 7th one, you don't necessarily die, but yes, you probably in red, yeah, you probably do. So this is a build around. I do think it can work. The problem is you need to have the right, it's really hard because you need to have the right mix of spells that you want to copy and ways to win the game that are not instants and sorceries, because if you can't cast instants and sorceries for the rest of the game after this gets whatever, there are ways to sack it. I don't know. I'm excited about this. I think this is a really sweet card. I do think it is good. It is 4 mana to not do anything, so there's that. element of things as well. There is Artifact Hate in the set, so that's why I have it in tier 3 and not higher. I do think there are a lot of downsides, but I think this is a sweet like build around card. I do think it works, and that's why I have it here instead of like tier 5. There are enough instants and sorceries, specifically like blue-red, I think can play this, and there's the instant speed draw spell in blue that's really, really good to copy with this. So that's kind of like your, to me, that kind of seems like the way you're getting ahead with this type of card. Diversion Specialist. 3 and a red for a 4/3 with Menace. You can pay 1 to sacrifice another creature or enchantment, exile the top card of your library, you may play it this turn. So this is like a pretty good rate by itself. So how good is 4 mana 4/3 Menace? We've seen it be pretty bad in recent sets. Like there have been several of them that have been printed over the last couple of years, and they've all been pretty bad. So the base rate is not especially amazing. And this has very reasonable upside. It's a good sack outlet, and so for that reason I've put it in tier 3 instead of tier 4. Still, the base rate of it dying to your 2 damage removal in red only in this set is actually the black 2 damage removal does not work for this. At common, anyways, the uncommon does, but the common does not. And I think, it's a solid card, but I don't think you want to be taking a 4-drop like this too highly until you're already in the deck. Enduring Courage. 2 red for a 3/3. Whenever another creature you control enters, it gets +2/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. When it dies, if it was a creature returned to the battlefield under its owner's control, it's an enchantment. So it's one of this cycle where they come back as a creature when they die. This one is very understated, right? So 4 mana 3/3, not very good. It's also double pipped. But making every single creature, and it's not the first one that enters, so it's every single creature that enters the battlefield. It doesn't have to be cast. There's all bets are off with this. You're kind of getting the full value with this. So every creature that enters the battlefield after this thing's on the battlefield is going to be a very real threat that your opponent has to deal with and block. If the creatures have abilities, that's really good. To me, this does seem like it's worth playing. We've seen these effects before where it's like 3 mana for the enchantment that gives a creature +2/+0 and haste on your at the beginning of combat. And I think this is a good version of that effect. What scares me is that it's a 4 mana 3/3, but the nice thing about it is you don't really mind trading it off. So yes, it blocks down, like it doesn't block their 4-drop, but probably does block their 3-drop, and you're happy to block their 3-drop with this because they might have creature exile removal, but they won't have enchantment removal. So I do think this is nice because it does come down, and it doesn't block well on turn 4, but it can block, and you do get value. You are still getting the value even if it does block, and then after turn 4, you're just going to be very, very far ahead if this manages to stick around because of how much additional statistics your creatures are getting. Fear of Being Hunted. 1 red for a 4/2 haste. It must be blocked if able. Yeah, so this actually isn't amazing. So first of all, it's a 2 toughness creature that's attacking on turn 3 and has to be blocked. I don't love that. I honestly think this might even be too high for this card. The upside is, oh man, I got a 4/2 haster that they have to block, and I think that's probably better because you can just choose not to attack, right? If it has bad attacks, a 3/3 attacks better on turn 2 than a 4/2 does. You can kind of think of it a little bit as like a deal 4 for 3, which isn't very good. I don't know. I'm not excited about this. It just has a lot of things that are wrong with it that that aren't conducive to being good all the time. The best case scenario, obviously very good. Your opponent has you get to attack on turn 3. You get to get in you get to get in with a different creature other than this one, so you can be like, okay, well, I'm forcing you to block this one. If you have 1 blocker, then you can get in with something else. So that's cool, and I think that's what keeps it in tier 3 for me. Fear of Burning Alive. 4 red for a 4/4. When it enters, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. Delirium. When a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, this deals that amount of damage to a target creature that player controls. So, 6 mana 4/4, deal 4 to each opponent. And if you have Delirium, it deals 4 to a creature as well. So, I mean, that's a lot of damage. Um, the nice thing about this is that by turn 6 or turn 7, which is when you're realistically going to be casting this, Delirium is going to be on. I mean, if your deck is built well, Delirium is going to be on with this. I think in most decks, Delirium is going to be on by turn 7 in this format. So, I think this is just going to be a deal for, like, I think this is just going to be a huge, like, Flame Tongue combo, essentially. We had the Skoa Ember Mage in MH3 that wasn't very good, but was okay. I think this is, I've bumped this up a tier. The Ember Mage ended up being a tier 3 card. I think this is like a tier, actually, I might put Ember Mage at tier, it was somewhere between 3 and 4. I think this is a tier 2 card, I think, clearly for me, because it does work with other non-combat damage as well. So, it's not like a huge upside. Like, it's not like a thing that's going to come up like every game, but that will come up sometimes. I mean, God forbid you have 2 of these in play. The game just ends immediately. So, yeah, it's just a strong 6-drop. But again, 6 mana, you don't want too many of them, right? You can't have too many. Fear of missing out. 1 red for a 2/3. When it enters, discard a card and then draw a card. Delirium. Whenever it attacks for the first time each turn, if there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, untap target creature. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So obviously this is a good card, right? So 2 mana, 2/3 Rummage is good. It's not amazing or anything. Notably, if it has good attacks, it essentially gets to get in twice. The problem is that how often is it going to have to get attacks? I mean, if you're on the play, you're going to get in for 4 on turn 2 or on turn 3. Okay. Then it probably doesn't have good attacks anymore on turn 4. But maybe it does if you have a combat trick or something, and then your opponent probably blocks the first time, and then they get got, and then... No, but then... I don't know. Obviously it's good. The question is it tier 1? And I have kept it out of tier 1 because I think that... the fact that it has to attack, it scares me. Because yes, in some games this is just going to run you over and there's nothing you can do, right? But other games, it's just going to kind of hang out and not be able to attack. And then you're just going to kind of be sitting there like, okay, like it's just a 2/3 that rummaged for me. Like, that was really good, but did it do anything else? Yeah, so I'm going to leave this in tier 2 for now. And maybe be wrong, and that's okay. Next, Glassworks, which is the left side of a room. When you unlock this door, it deals 4 damage to target creature an opponent controls, and Shattered Yard, 4 and a red. At the beginning of your end step, this room deals 1 damage to each opponent. Notably, the Shattered Yard does it on your end step instead of your upkeep, which is a huge upgrade from like the Tithing Blade backside. I think this card's really strong, obviously, because I've rated it in tier 2. Just having value attached to your removal is so good, and there's a lot of things in this set that want you to have rooms unlocked and can unlock rooms for discounts. Like Shattered Yard, you might think, oh, that's so expensive, are you really ever going to play it? I mean, no, you would never play that card in your deck, but when it's free on your removal spell, you're just going to be thrilled to have it. And, yeah, I mean, this is just really solid removal. And, I mean, there's going to be some games where, like, on turn 5, you're just kind of chilling, and then you just tap out for Shattered Yard, and just, your opponent's sitting there like, well, I guess there's a removal spell sitting on board that I have to, like, I'm now under pressure because this thing's killing me. So, yeah, I mean, there are going to be some games where you just cast Shattered Yard, and it's going to be like putting a clock on your opponent when things are, stalled out. So that actually is going to come up, I think, pretty frequently. Grab the prize. 1 and a red for a sorcery is additional cost to cast this spell. Discard a card, draw 2 cards. If the discarded card wasn't a land card, this deals 2 damage to each opponent. Rummage effect, really good in a set where, Rummaging effect, really good in a set where Delirium matters. This is a really good Delirium enabler. The one thing about it is that it is a sorcery, which is somewhat good and somewhat bad, depending on your Delirium configuration. Dealing 2 to your opponent is good. Basically, I mean, either you're discarding a land, which means you have too many lands, and that's good, or you're discarding a spell and hitting your opponent for 2, which is also good. So, I mean, this is just always going to be good. I do think, like, because it's a sorcery and not an instant, I'm not putting it in tier 2. If it was an instant, I would put it in tier 2 because like being an enabler at instant speed is really strong. I still think this is going to be a good card and you're going to play it in pretty much every deck. I just don't think it's just like... Some decks will really want it if you like need Delirium like enabling help, but I don't think it's just like an every deck, every day, like best red common type card. Hand that feeds. 1 in a red for a 2/2 with Delirium. When it attacks, well, there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard. It gets +2/+0 and menace until end of turn. Yeah, so this is just a really mediocre 2-drop that, when you have Delirium on, is actually very strong, but it doesn't help you enable Delirium in any way. It's only 1 creature type. It's just a 2/2 for the majority of the early game, which is when it matters, so not very exciting to me. Impossible Inferno. 4 in a red for an instant. It deals 6 damage to target creature. Delirium, if there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, exile the top card of your library. You may play it until the end of your next turn. So normally the 5 mana removal spell in red that like deals 5 or 6 tends to be too expensive and not very good. This one's interesting because, again, similar to the other 6-drop I talked about, like when you're going to be casting this, Delirium is going to be on a higher percentage of the time. So it's going to be doable for this to actually draw you a card a lot, and when your removal spell draws you a card for 5 mana, that's pretty good. Like, that is pretty good. So I do think this is good, but not amazing, is kind of how I feel about it. Like, I'm happier to play this than I would be for most spells like it that we've seen in the past few sets. Infernal Phantom, 3 in a red for a 2/3. It has Eerie whenever an enchantment enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So the problem is that this is a 4 mana 2/3. Yes, there's going to be lots of ways to trigger it, but it's just too bad. Like, it's too bad on blocks, right? Like, yes, in theory you could be like, oh well, I block and I trade, but they're 3/3. It's like, okay, but like that's not actually that good for your 4-drop to be doing that. And then I don't know. It does play well with a lot of things. It just, 4 mana for a 2/3 is really bad, and it's easy to remove. Like, there's a lot of removal that hits it, and it's not that exciting. Like, it just isn't that exciting to me given how expensive it is. Irreverent Gremlin. 1 on a red for a 2/2 with menace. Whenever another creature you control with power 2 or less energy, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Do this only once each turn. 2 mana 2/2 menace is a good card. It's not amazing or anything. It's good. The 2 mana, the power 2 or less archetype thing. There are a lot of creatures in this set with power 2 or less, specifically in red and white, designed to kind of enable this. However, it just kind of seems okay to me. I don't think this is one of those cards that I look at and I'm like, man, I have to kill that immediately or it's going to take over the game. It's kind of like, oh, that's some incidental value, but I'd rather just like get my own game plan developing, And to me, that screams sort of like tier 3. Maybe it is just tier 2 just because it's a solid 2-drop. You're going to put it in every red deck. It's going to be okay in every deck. It just, to me, kind of seems like it's kind of good in the decks that I don't really believe in and bad in the decks that I do believe in. So it's kind of like, that's sort of why I have it here. Leyline of Resonance. 2 red for an enchantment. It's a leyline. If it's in your opening hand, you begin with the name with it on the battlefield. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single creature you control, copy that spell. You may choose your targets for the copy. I don't know why I bother reading the ley lines. Yeah, people are mad about this one because in standard it kills people on turn 2 sometimes. I don't know. It's probably gonna be overblown hype wise because that's usually how this type of thing goes. We'll see. Yeah, not a limited card. Most Valuable Slayer. 3 and a red for a 2/4. When you attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+0 and gains a first strike until end of turn. So yeah, I mean, it's doing something on turn when it enters the battlefield, which is nice. It basically is going to mean that you're getting an attack in, extremely likely on turn 4, which is good. If this is kind of like actually the best survival enabler in like the whole set. Funnily enough, and it's in red, which isn't a survival color, so I don't know. But yeah, it looks like a fine 4-drop you can play in your deck. Not super special or anything, but it looks fine to me. It looks like it's going to be good in any red deck, but never amazing. Again, another power 2 or less thing. There's a lot of power 2 or less things, so maybe the red-white deck is actually functional, but and if the red-white deck is functional, this card is going to be very, very good in that deck. So keep that in mind as well. Norn, Swift Survivalist. Single red mana for a 2/1. It can't block. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may exile it. You may play that card from exile this turn. So this is weird. It's a very weird ability. Generally, when you get a 1 mana 2/1 in red, the card tends to be decent. I think this is like doing enough interesting things. Like you can do it. It applies to this as well. So like you can cast it like itself if it gets blocked. I believe you can like recast it. Like this allows you to like attack all, and then like if your opponent has 2 blockers, you have 3 attackers. You attack all. They block 2 of your things. You get in for 2, but you get to recast your stuff, so you're still like getting damage in while you're still keeping your board alive. So like that's kind of a cool mode. I think it's fine. I just don't think it's amazing. Overlord of the Boiler Bilges. 4 red for a 5/5 with impending 4 for 2 red. When it enters or attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target. So 4 mana removal spell would be pretty inefficient, right? So 2 red for a deal 4 to any target isn't the best, but when it comes attached to a creature that can also just be a 6 mana 5/5 that deals 4 to any target whenever it enters or attacks, now we're getting somewhere. And yeah, so this just seems really, really strong. It's, you know, Inferno Titan-esque. Inferno Titan's busted, so this should be very good. I actually think it's worse than Inferno Titan, but you know, being worse than Inferno Titan is not a crime. Painter's Studio, 2 in a red for a left side of a room. When you unlock this door, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them until the end of your next turn. Defaced Gallery, 1 in a red. Whenever you attack, attacking creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. This looks really powerful to me. So, obviously the 3 mana mode to exile 2 cards from your library isn't, like, the most exciting mode of all time. Like, that's a lot. Giving all your attacking creatures +1/+0 when they attack is pretty good. Like, that's a pretty good thing to have. Like, as a 2 mana enchantment, it's not something that you would play in every deck. But, you know, I mean, in some games, it's just going to run the opponent over. And then in the games where it's not running the opponent over, like, this does have misses, right? This does have game states where you're like, oh man, I'm going to cast the 3 mana mode and, like, hope I hit, like, a couple lands, and then I, like, it just does help smooth out your draws a bit. Eventually, it's going to make your attacks better. It just looks like a really nice value card to me. Piggy Bank. 1 in a red for a 3/2. When it dies, create a treasure token. Just looks like a really strong 2-drop to me. It goes in any red deck. It enables Delirium. It's just a big 2-drop. So you're basically always going to want this. Making treasure is very good. I think this is the only thing in the set that makes treasure. So, yep, looks good to me. Not a whole lot to say about this one. Just above rate 2. And in red, above rate 2s are very strong. Pyroclasm. 1 and red for sorcery. It deals 2 damage to each creature. So I think this might be main deckable. It depends on what your deck is trying to do. If you're a slower, like, rooms-based, like, blue-red deck, I think you could probably play this in the main and you'd be pretty happy about it. If you're trying to be a red-white deck or a faster red deck, you probably don't want it very much. Red-black probably doesn't want it. Red-green probably doesn't want it, so it's like blue-red only. And it's like, okay, so in that deck, would you main deck it? Maybe. And so that's why I have it in tier 4. It's obviously a great sideboard card. Certain matchups are just, like, really bad to this, so in those matchups it's going to be good, but I think it's not necessary to play it in the main deck. And this is one that, like, other people have played with before. I haven't played in a, you know, standard limited set with this, so I have less experience than a lot of people with this card, so we'll, you know, it's sort of a personal learning moment for me as well, but yeah. 1 in a red for a 2/2 with 1 and tap. Target creature power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. So the ability is not the worst. Again, we've got this like, oh, this allows you to get the red signpost uncommon in. It's like, well, what if they kill your red signpost uncommon? Well, literally nothing happens for the rest of the game. It's like, I don't know. Mm, I don't know. The more I see these red cards, the more I'm like, oh, the 2 power deck might be real. Because the white cards didn't inspire me at all, but the red cards are kind of like, maybe, maybe there's something here. Maybe we're cooking here. The one thing is that there's not a whole lot of like go wide like payoffs for just like being wide. It's kind of like you're going wide, but then you're attacking with one thing. Is kind of what it looks like in the red deck. And that's generally not a recipe for success in red-white. Generally, with red-white, you want to be going wide and then attacking with everything. Historically, but we'll see. It could get there, and I could be very wrong about it, and I would accept that. I just think this 2-drop is mediocre. Rampaging Soul Rager. 2 in a red for a 1/4. It gets +3/+0 as long as there are 2 or more unlocked doors among rooms you control. So interestingly, I think this might be playable. Because you are going to be playing a lot of rooms in your deck. Like the good red decks are like, it's one of those interesting cards that it's like, if your deck has a lot of rooms, your deck is probably good because generally the rooms are good. They provide value. Like if you can afford to play 7 rooms in your deck, you probably have a good deck because rooms inherently provide value, and if you're getting the good ones and getting to play those, your deck's going to be very strong. So this actually gets better in those decks, and in decks that are worse, it's going to be worse. Obviously, like, you know what I mean, but like, because any card gets better in a good deck and worse in a bad deck. But specifically, this one scales like it's kind of like a Win Morty type of card where like I could see myself later in the format being like, oh, actually, you want to just play this in all your room-related decks, and like you actually do actively want it. But I don't think you would ever you would never take this over a room card. I don't think like in any spot. So that's why I have it in tier 4. Razorkin Horde Caller. 4 in a red for a 4/4 haste. When you attack, create a 1/1 red gremlin creature token. It's Aomir, baby. They brought it back. Aomir with, it's not like and I think this might be better than Aomir. I know it's like, is that a crazy thing to say? It has 1 fewer power. I mean, first of all, Aomir itself had to attack, not this creature is whenever you attack. Aomir, you had to have the highest power on board, which this doesn't make you have, and I think it had to attack. So now this is going to be attacking, but this to me just looks like, I don't know. This just is a lot of stuff because you can do the thing where you can just attack your 1/1 every turn. You know what I mean? If you have something on board that like you can sack the 1/1s or something, you can just be like, okay, attack with my 1/1, sacrifice it when they block. Now I have a free one. I got a free like value out of my thing. Like that's like the worst case scenario with this. The worst case scenario is they have a 4/5 and stonewall it, but that doesn't happen very often. So. Notably, the Goblin is not attacking, or the Gremlin is not attacking when it comes into play. Very powerful. This to me just is very, very strong. Razorkin Needlehead. Red for a 2/2. It has first strike during your turn. When an opponent draws a card, it deals 1 damage to them. So obviously this is good when you play it on turn 2 because your opponent will draw a card on turn 3 and will continue to draw cards for the rest of the game. It has first strike. So it gets in. The problem is, of course, it's double red, so it's not going to perform very well statistically. It's just not going it's going to get overdrafted. All that stuff we say about double pipped cards in limited applies to this card. If you are a mono red deck, this is a very good card. If you are anything else, you probably don't want to play it. So I don't know. It's like a tier 2 card in mono red and like a tier 4 to 5 card everywhere else. Ripchain Razorkin. 3 in a red for a 5/3 with reach. You can pay 2 in a red to sacrifice a land to draw a card. So we've seen different, this is like Grabby Giant is kind of like the one. This is considerably worse than Grabby Giant, because it doesn't just like have an alternate mode where you can just make a treasure for 2 mana, which actually came up a lot. To me, this just it doesn't attack or block very well as a 5/3. 5/3 is one of the, I think, worst stat lines in all of Magic. It's about as bad as like a 1/2. 1/2s are pretty bad. 5/3 is also pretty bad. They just don't really get into combat super well ever at any point during the game. So it kind of, just to me, like, it doesn't, like, I'm not even convinced this actually blocks flyers. So not very excited about it. The Roller Crusher Ride. X, 2 in a red for a enchantment. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, while there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, it deals double that damage instead. When it enters, it deals X damage to each of up to X target creatures. So, 5 mana to deal 4 damage to 2 creatures is a really good upside mode. And this sort of effect is actually pretty good. There's a lot of things in red that deal non-combat damage. So this is pretty cool. Like, it's a pretty cool, like, thing to have. The problem is that it doesn't do anything really. Like, for 4 mana, you can maybe deal 2 damage, or you can deal like 1 damage to something if you don't have Delirium, which is really bad. If you're really all in on Delirium and you have it working like every single game consistently, this is going to be a good card. I just don't think it's going to be busted in every deck. Scorching Dragonfire, 1 in a red for an instant. It deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If that creature or planeswalker would die this turn, exile it instead. Yeah, this is going to be very strong. I don't think. I mean, it's just exile is so good. 3 damage is a lot in this set. I mean, what more do you want, right? Like, if it didn't exile, it would kind of be on like Fraud Watch, but it exiles, so I'm not on Fraud Watch. I think this is going to be busted. I think it's going to be one of the best 2 red commons. I would be very surprised if this isn't on the best red commons list or best common in the set list. It's just a very, very powerful effect to be exiling in this format. Screaming Nemesis, 2 and a red for a 3/3 haste. When it is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any other target. If a player is dealt damage this way, they can't gain life for the rest of the game. So it turns off your opponent's life gain sometimes. It's also just a 3 mana 3/3 haste. Like, if they block it, like, this card's just busted all the way around. I think this might see play in standard. I don't know. I mean, this just seems really hard to deal with. It's a lot of. I really think they probably should have made this 1 red. I think 2 in a red is too much, but yeah, this just is a lot of rate for 3 mana, and you're gonna get the maximum out of it for the whole game. Ticket Booth, 2 in a red for a room. When you unlock this door, manifest Dread, and then Tunnel of Hate, 4 red. When you attack, target attacking creature gains double strike until end of turn. Neither of these sides of this card is super appealing. 3 mana to manifest Dread is a little expensive. As good as manifest Dread is, and it is good, it's worth more than 2 mana. I don't think it's quite worth 3 mana. And then the other side of this, you're just never really gonna want to pay 6 for. I mean, there are some spots, but it's just like. It's a nice card to have access to, but it's not a nice card to like want to be playing. So I think playing this in your deck, you would hope to not, unless you're all in on like room stuff. So yeah. Trial of Agony, single red for a sorcery. Choose 2 target creatures controlled by the same opponent. That player chooses one of those creatures. Trial of Agony deals 5 damage to the creature, and the other can't block this turn. So essentially, you get to kill your opponent's second best creature, and you get to take 2 creatures out of combat for 1 turn. It is 1 mana. So like, despite the weirdness of this card, it is very efficient. I don't know. I think it's good. I do think it's very good. Like, 1 mana to deal 5. Like, 1 mana, basically always kill their second best creature. And make another creature not be able to block. So you're removing 2 blockers for 1 mana, which is a lot of blocker removal in red. I'm just debating whether I should move this up or not to tier 2. It's not my type of card. It's not a card that I really like. It doesn't really fit my playstyle very well because it's not. It gives my opponent a lot of control, so I don't love, like, for me personally, I don't love it. I think that it will perform better for other people than it will for me, but I think it is good. So I'm gonna leave it here for now, and we'll see. No, 1 mana to 5. Like you have to be getting use out of the can't block mode. That's the problem for me, anyways. Like that's the issue. Is like if you just 1 mana kill their second best. No, 1 mana kill their second best creatures. What about the glimmer creatures? They exist. That doesn't. I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say it's just. I'm gonna leave it here. I think it's good, but not amazing. And I could be wrong about that. Turn inside out. 1 red mana for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn. When it dies, manifest dread. So we've seen this effect before, a couple of times. The dies give a 2/2. This is the best version of it, other than the one that was in white and Midnight Hunt. That gave lifelink and a 1/1 flyer. This is, I think, comparable to that, and that card was tier 2 by the end of the format. I think this is sort of in that same neighborhood. It's just like Manifest Dread is very powerful. It's a Delirium enabler. This just seems like a really strong combat trick to me. It just has a lot of power for 1 mana. Like you can use this as burn like a lot of times, and it's actually like it can actually get there. So I like it. I think this will be decent. I think you will want it. Should I put it back to tier 3? Probably. I probably should. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. I think this is just a more responsible rating for this card because, like, am I really like in multiples it does get worse. So I could see this being higher. I originally had it tier 2. I want to put it in tier 3. I think it's closer to average. Like, it is a very good combat trick. It's obviously very powerful. It does have miss scenarios, which is bad, and so that's why I'm going to put it in tier 3. Untimely Malfunction. 1 and a red for an instant, destroy target artifact, destroy change the target of a target spell or ability with a single target, or 1 or 2 creatures can't block this turn. The second mode is very interesting because it's I think that mode to have on like a choose one spell is actually pretty good given that this is 2 mana. I still think its modes are all very situational, but I think that over the course of a game one of them will come up. And for that reason I've rated it tier 3. I just think that the awkwardness does leave a little bit of room for shenanigans to happen where like there are just games where this doesn't really come up and it doesn't do anything. So I think that in most games it will do something, and the thing that it does will be very good. In the games that it does nothing, you're going to be very unhappy. Vengeful Possession. 2 in a red for a sorcery. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap it. It gains haste until end of turn. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Yep, this is just a nice act of treason with extra value. Those tend to be very good. I don't think this is the best one we've seen, but I do think it's good. I think you're going to play this in pretty much every red deck because, again, just getting to rummage on your act of treason is solid. Red-black is going to love this card, so I expect that it'll be good there. It'll be okay in every red deck. Vicious Clown. 2 in a red for a 2/3. Whenever another creature with power you control with power 2 or less enters, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Not exciting. Obviously, if you do the thing where you go like this into the red-white spell that makes 3 1/1s, cool. You're attacking with like a 7/3. I don't know, man. It's a 3-mana 2/3. Like it's just a 3-mana 2/3. At best, I could upgrade this to tier 4 in red-white, but the problem is that I just a 2/3 is so bad. Like you have to block sometimes, and this card doesn't block ever. It just never blocks. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't. No types. It's only for the red-white deck. That's the only deck you could even foresee playing this in, and I don't even think it's very good in that deck. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the red-white. Like I've seen a lot of pieces today where I'm like, oh, the red-white deck. Oh, power 2 or less. We talked a lot about it, so like maybe it's in my head. Maybe I'm a believer. Not there yet, but we will see. Violent Urge. Single red mana for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. Delirium. If there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, it gains double strike until end of turn. So, me thinking about how good 1 mana +1/+0 double strike is, like just how good is that card? If you think this hits its ceiling, and I think that's like tier 3. I don't know. It's not that exciting, to be honest with you. even at its best. And this isn't that like, cause tier the first Pulse first strike we've seen be bad in like every set for the last long time. And this is like an upgrade, but how much of an upgrade is it? I don't know. It remains to be seen, but I'm not super excited. And the last red card, Waltz of Rage. 3 red for a sorcery target creature. You control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature until end of turn. Whenever a creature you control dies, exile the top card of your library. You may play it until end of your next turn. I don't know. This to me looks really bad. It's one of those cards. So here, let's talk this through and see if I want to change my mind on it. So what does the average board state look like on turn 5? Each player has like a 3/3 and a 2/2. Maybe that's not reasonable. Maybe somebody's got a 4/4 and like I don't. Sorcery speed, 5 mana. You have to have a creature in play. The creature has to have a high power by default. A lot of red creatures have 2 power. Yeah, I think I'm off this. I do think yeah. Am I in? Am I on board with this? It's killing. Like sometimes it just kills your own stuff. I'm off it. I need. It needs to be proved to me. This is one of those ones that like, end of the set, I could be coming back being like, "Yep, got this one wrong, guys. Sorry, just didn't see it." But there's just gonna be games where this doesn't do anything, or it like turns your 2/2s into other 2/2s, and I'm like not that excited about that. So yeah, I think I'm off it. That's it for me on red. Hope you enjoyed the red part of the limited set review. Check out the other parts of the set review if you liked it. I'll see you next time.